Okay, today we are going to be talking about the historical topic of the Battle of Lexington, which was the first battle of the Revolutionary War. The question that we're going to be investigating while we're learning about this topic is who fired the first shot at the Battle of Lexington? Was it the British soldiers or was it the colonial militia that was fighting the soldiers? So, a couple of things you need to know before we dive into our evidence and get started. You need to know these two terms for this lesson. The first one is militia. I just used that word. The militia is a military force that engages in rebel activities, typically in opposition to a regular army. So, a militia isn't like an official military and official soldiers. So, in this case, during the Revolution, the militia was made up of townspeople, men who had agreed to fight if there was going to be some kind of battle or outbreak of war. So these are just regular people that are armed, that are trying to organize in order to rebel and fight against the British Army. The second term you need to know is Minutemen. Minutemen were citizen soldiers who could be ready to fight at a moment's notice. So Minutemen are part of the militia. These are the people who are ready to fight if they're told, quote, the British are coming. So you need to know those terms. The first piece of evidence that we're going to look at to answer our question, who fired the first shot at the Battle of Lexington, is actually a passage from our textbook. So this passage comes from pages 152 to 153. And just follow along while I read. And then when I'm done reading, I have a couple questions I want you to answer off to the side in your Ed Puzzle video. So here's what our textbook has to say about the Battle of Lexington. In April 1775, General Thomas Gage, the new governor of Massachusetts, learned that Minutemen were storing arms in Concord, about 20 miles from Boston. On April 18, 1775, he sent troops to seize the arms and capture some important colonial leaders. As the troops set out, a signal sent by the Patriots appeared in the steeple of Boston's Old North Church. Two men, Paul Revere and William Dawes, then rode through the night to warn Minutemen. 5 miles from Concord, in the town of Lexington, about 77 Minutemen were waiting when the British arrived. The British commander ordered the Minutemen to go home. They refused. Suddenly, a shot rang out. Nobody knows who fired it, but it turned out to be the first shot of the American Revolution, the shot heard round the world. The British then opened fire, killing 8 Americans. A larger battle took place in nearby Concord. This time, 400 Minutemen fought the British, killing 3 of them. As the British retreated toward Boston, about 4,000 Americans fired at them from behind trees and fences. By the time the British reached Boston, almost 300 of them had been killed or wounded. So that's what our textbook has to say about this battle. I want you guys to pop over to the questions in a moment. It'll pause and it will pop up. And the questions that you're going to be answering are, number 1, who fired the first shot according to our textbook? And number 2, did the colonists stand their ground or start to disperse? So go ahead and be thorough when you're answering those questions off to the side over here. Now, heading back to our slideshow, this map shows you the route that was taken during this battle. So if you take a look at these blue arrows that start here, and it says Dawes, and they go this way, and then you'll also see a set of blue arrows to the north, and it says Revere. These are the 2 men that alerted the Minutemen that the British were coming. So you can see the route that they took. And then the gray arrows starting here are the British marching to Lexington, where the first battle was, onto Concord, where the second battle was, and then that's where they retreated and turned back, headed to Boston. So that's the route that was taken during these technically 2 battles that happened in one night. Okay, now what we're going to look at are 2 primary source documents from 2 different points of view during the Battle of Lexington. So the first document that we're going to look at is document A, and I'm going to pop over to document A. And as you know, before we read a primary source, we always need to read the source information at the bottom. Sometimes it's at the top, but on this one, it's at the bottom. It says source. Entry for April 19th, 1775, from the diary of Lieutenant John Barker, an officer in the British Army. So now you need to answer the sourcing question, which is when was this document written and what kind of document is it? Okay, now I will actually read the document and you can follow along with me on my screen or on your hard copy. It says, 19th. At 2 o'clock, we began our march by wading through a very long stream up to our middles. About 5 miles away from a town called Lexington, we heard there were some hundreds of people collected together, intending to oppose us. At 5 o'clock, we arrived there and saw a number of people, I believe between 200 and 300, formed in a common in the middle of the town. We still continued advancing, prepared for an attack, though without intending to attack them. As we came near them, they fired 1 or 2 shots, upon which our men, without any orders, fired and put them to flight. We then formed on the common, but with some difficulty. The men were so wild they could hear no orders. We waited a considerable time there, and at length proceeded on our way to Concord. Okay, feel free to reread this document if you need to. You have a hard copy of it, but make sure that when you're done reading, you pop over to your questions and you answer. How would it have been, or how would it have felt to be a British soldier at this moment in history based on what Barker writes in his diary? And according to Barker, who fired first and what happened after that first shot? Again, please be detailed and use complete sentences when you're typing your answers in the Edpuzzle video. All right, we are going to move on to document B. Again, we'll read the source information at the bottom. Source: sworn by 34 Minutemen on April 25th before 3 justices of the peace. So when you're answering your sourcing question, we got a couple of different questions to answer to source for this one. What kind of document is this, and when was it written? And then I want you to think about, do you trust this secondary document more or less than a diary entry, which is what our first document was? And then whose side does this document represent? And what do you predict they will say based on the side that they're coming from? After you've answered those questions, we will go ahead and read document B. Okay, document B goes like this. We, Nathaniel Mulliken, Philip Russell, followed by the names of 32 other men present on Lexington Green on April 19, 1775, all of lawful age and inhabitants of Lexington, do testify and declare that on the 19th of April, about 5 o'clock in the morning, we proceeded towards the Green and saw a large body of troops marching towards us. Some of our men were coming to the Green, and others had reached it, at which time they began to disperse. While our backs were turned on the British troops, they fired on us, and a number of our men were instantly killed and wounded. Not a gun was fired by any person in our company on the British soldiers, to our knowledge, before they fired on us, and continued firing until we had all made our escape. All right, again, feel free to read document B again and make notes on your copy if you need to, and then answer the following contextualization questions. What story do the Minutemen tell? How does this differ from Barker's account? Again, be specific. What's the significance of the phrase, to our knowledge? So why do they add that in there? Why do you think it's important that we key in on that specific part of their testimony? And which account do you find more reliable, and why? Are there any facts that both accounts agree on? Okay, now that you have answered those questions, we are going to pop back over to our Google Slides presentation, and I have the last couple pieces of evidence that I want you to take into consideration while we're trying to figure out who fired the first shot of the Battle of Lexington. Here's this first photo. The creator of this, it's not a photograph, I'm sorry, they didn't have cameras back in 1775. It's an image. I think this is a painting, and it's by a man named Amos Doolittle, and he created this in 1775. So take a look at this image. Notice where the Minutemen are. Notice how the British soldiers look. And take that all into consideration. And then take a look at the second image. this image is depicting the same event, the Battle of Lexington. It looks very different, I'd say, than our first image, but it is showing the same event. Again, take notice of the British soldiers, take notice of the Minutemen, and this image was created by Henry Sandom in 1886. So think about the time periods. Notice the differences in these two pictures. And I'll tell you that this second image was actually commissioned by the United States Post Office as a commemorative stamp. So I believe it was in 1975 during the bicentennial, so when the United States was celebrating its 200th anniversary, basically. The post office said, hey, we're going to use this painting, the one that I'm on the screen right now, as a way to commemorate, the first battle of the Revolution. So they chose this one. They did not choose this one to commemorate that 200-year anniversary. So what I want you guys to do now, a couple questions are going to pop up asking you which of these images is probably more accurate based on our reading of the documents. So based on our two documents, based on the textbook, which of these images do you think is more fitting for what we know happened based on what the evidence says? So Amos Doolittle, is it better at an accurate portrayal of what this event was about, or the Henry Sandom one? And the second question, why would the post office commission a stamp with an inaccurate image? And the third question, is it irresponsible for the post office to commission such a stamp? So go ahead and take some time to answer these questions. Okay, now taking into consideration all of our evidence from today, the textbook reading, the two primary source documents, one from the British perspective, one from the Minutemen perspective, as well as the two images, primary source pictures that you looked at. Take that all into consideration, and I want you to answer one final question, which is, who fired the first shot at the Battle of Lexington, and how do you know this? So use all the information from today to help you write a conclusion to our final question, what happened during this battle? Give a summary using the evidence. If you have questions, come see me. Bye.